Hello, hello. If you're looking for the Brandon Hall Group EI webinar measuring learning impact going from learning to earning, you are in the right place. Thank you for being here this morning. My name is Matt Pittman. I am a principal analyst with Brandon Hall Group, and I will be your host today. We're going to give folks a few minutes to get in here. We're still about a minute away from the top of the hour or so. As you're coming on, it would be great if you would take a minute to find that chat window and pop it open and follow Milciade's example and let us know where you're joining us from today. Buenos días from la República Dominica. And don't get too excited, that's about the extent of my Spanish. But having lived and worked in Miami for many, many years, you do pick up a few things. Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois, Lyon, France, Sarasota, up the road from me, College Station. Hello, Anna from the Ukraine. Netherlands, Denmark, Charleston, South Carolina, and of course, Switzerland and India and Ireland as well. Oh, I see Cape Town, South Africa. UK, Dubai, very nice. Jamaica. Well, there you go, Gabriel. It's a global gathering. All right. Still have a few folks jumping on. We'll give it just another second. Right. I think we will go ahead and jump in. Hello again, and welcome to Measuring Learning Impact Going from Learning to Earning. Today's webinar from Brandon Hall Group and EI powered by MPS. I am Matt Pittman, Principal Analyst with the Brandon Hall Group, and it's my pleasure to be your webinar host today. We are very grateful to today's webinar sponsor. EI powered by MPS is an emotionally intelligent learning experience design company. They partner with customers in their digital transformation journeys. They have over 3 decades of experience in designing learning and performance support solutions that drive performance gain and maximize training ROI and ROE. They deliver high-impact learning solutions that drive deeper and more meaningful learner engagement, enable effective upskilling, and improve employee performance. They create high ROI for the business and the organization, from strategy to development to delivery to measurement. They work with their customers to ensure training investments deliver business results. You can learn more about them on their website. If you are new to Brandon Hall Group, we are an analyst and research firm that partners with organizations to drive excellence in the practice of human capital management across that entire spectrum. We offer a variety of tools and resources to make that happen, including research membership, professional certifications, our well-known excellence awards programs, and advisory offerings. And we are always looking to help you do what you do even better. At the heart of what we do at Brandon Hall Group is our research, and we have a few surveys open right now that you see listed here on the screen, including our Hitting the Bullseye, How to Target Critical Skills Gap at Scale, and an Enabling Elite Performance. We have just a few surveys left in our research calendar for 2023. So if you head to our website at brandonhall.com, you'll see a button that says open surveys in the upper right corner of the screen or towards the upper right corner of the screen. And we encourage you to add your voice to these important conversations. We do want today's webinar to be an interactive event. You've already been successful largely in finding that chat window and engaging with us there. We will be leveraging that capability throughout our time together today. In addition to that, you do have access to a Q&A panel. If you click on that panel, you can submit questions to our panelists today, which we will address in our Q&A time towards the end of our webinar this afternoon. Also want you to know that there will be a recording and handouts made available to you via email after the session today, sometime this afternoon or early into tomorrow. So don't worry about trying to write notes or capture screenshots. You will have the opportunity to receive that link to this recording, as well as a handout version of the presentation after the fact. As we go through today, we will also be using the polling feature, so we look forward to capturing your input and your involvement in that way as well. And with that, let me introduce our panel for today. I'm pleased to have with us Rahul Arora, who is the chairman and CEO of MPS Limited. He is an alumnus of the Indian School of Business and Babson College. Rahul leads the growth agenda as chairman and CEO of MPS, the parent company of EI. Rahul's vision for MPS is to create a compelling learning company at a meaningful scale that helps the world learn smarter. At EI, Rahul is leading its team to power emotionally intelligent learning experiences for its customers by combining the power of human connection and empathy. He is joined by Gabriel Shateman, who is the HR vice president at Swiss Re, a leading global reinsurer and a member of the Fortune 500. He has a 3-decade career in corporate learning and development. His commitment to innovative methodologies has resulted in more than a dozen industry awards. His role extends to shaping outcome-driven proficiency solutions on a global scale. Beyond his professional endeavors, Gabriel extends his expertise in aiding refugees seeking employment. He finds personal enjoyment in motorcycling across alpine landscapes, traversing borders between Switzerland, Austria, Italy, and France. Welcome, Gabriel. And also joining us today is Paul Kent, who's the senior manager for PepsiCo University Global Operations based in Cork, Ireland. He's a master's in human resource management and a bachelor of science in chemical technology from Munster Technological University. He's been with PepsiCo since 2002, developed and executed numerous global technical training programs. He's also an adjunct assistant professor at University College of Dublin, a frequent conference speaker on the training and HR agenda. He's also a fellow of the Learning Professional Institute. He is a founding member of the PepsiCo University College of Dublin Professional Diploma in Food Safety and Quality, where he was a module co-author and is the program lead. And he is an avid footballer holding a UEFA C license football coach and Football Association of Ireland grassroots leader certified. Welcome, Paul. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Here's a quick overview of our session. We'll go through a quick introduction, and then Gabriel will talk to us about the pivotal role that L&D plays in driving business. And then Paul will talk to us about challenges that make it difficult for L&D teams to link learning to revenue. And then Rahul will talk about learning to earning, how L&Ds can elevate their position by establishing a stronger connection between L&D initiatives, business impact, and revenue. And as we get started, one of the things we'd like to understand is where you are coming to our conversation from. What is it that what is your particular view of the world? So my colleague Melissa is going to bring up a poll right now, and we'd like to know what setting best describes your work environment or your industry. Are you part of corporate L&D or some other corporate business function, maybe corporate HR? Are you on the vendor side? Do you work at a school or in academia, or if something else altogether? Just select that other selection and then let us know in the chat. It's like we've got some corporate L&D and nonprofit coming up in the chat. And Melissa, whenever it looks like those responses are slowing down, you feel free to publish those results. State government, government L&D, credit union, NGO, federal government education department, very good. Solution provider. Yeah, so it looks like majority corporate L&D or some sort of L&D function, and some on the vendor side and some on the business function side. So a nice mix, Gabriel, for us to work with today, I think. All right, so what I want to do now is just set the stage briefly for how this topic comes together. For many years, L&D has been trying to demonstrate the value of learning, and we've gone through levels of evaluation, and we've gone through ROI, and we've gone through ROE, return on expectations or return on experience. We have modernized our services, we've reorganized our distribution methods, we professionalized our measurement process, but we're still not quite connecting the dots. So it raises some important questions. And should we continue to focus on the value of learning, or is it time to redefine the future of L&D and focus on business value? There are very common challenges that we as learning professionals all know and experience. This is from our Brandon Hall Group 2023 Learning and Development Benchmarking Study. And what I want you to notice is 57% of those responses identify the ability to measure the effectiveness of learning as one of our most common challenges, and in fact was the highest rated challenge on that part of the survey. In a recent study that was more focused specifically on learning measurement, we asked participants to rate how effective or proficient they are at various aspects of measurement and data collection. And what you can see from this chart is we peak to the right, which is the higher proficiency, so lower proficiency to the left, higher proficiency to the right, that things like identifying outcomes and targeting learning we're pretty good at, but things like collecting data, pulling business data and relating and connecting that to business data, integrating our LMSs with other business systems, those are the things that we're still struggling with as a profession. When many of you registered, we did have some polling questions on that registration page where we asked about how well aligned the learning function you felt your learning function was in supporting the organization's performance goals. And so on this slide, what I want you to notice is the dark purple are you who have joined us today on the webinar. This is what you all said. Mostly aligned, somewhat aligned. The light blue squares were the results from our recent learning measurement survey, where we asked this same question, where we were actually a little farther to the not aligned side on our general survey. So what I love about this and what I think this tells us is that the people who are here, who are engaging in this conversation, are very aligned and in tune with the need to align learning to performance. We also asked if you had a standardized approach for learning measurement, and overwhelmingly it is consistent either no or we're working on it. So you're in the right place, because we're going to talk about that today. And then, does your learning measurement strategy include a definitive focus on linking learning to individual or organizational performance? And again, largely we're working on it. Some of us do. So some of you are going to teach us because you've got it figured out already, which makes our job that much easier. And with that, let me turn things over to Gabriel to start our conversation.
Well, it's a great pleasure. First of all, I'd like to thank Brandon Hall and Rahul and EI Design for this opportunity to talk about business value creation. So here the title says, the pivotal role of L&D plays in driving business. The title of today's seminar is actually not From Learning to Measuring Learning. The title is From Learning to Earning. And I think it's super difficult, if not impossible, to truly measure the value in US dollars of a learning intervention. How do you want to measure that, you know? And so this whole thing started a few years ago when I tried to participate in Brandon Hall Awards and we were not winning. And I thought something is not working out here. So I tried to become and applied as a judge for ATD, Stevie, Brandon Hall, and others. And in the process of reading dozens, if not hundreds, of these award submissions, I realized the difference between the successful ones and all the others that participate mostly is the ability to demonstrate the business impact. That changed me. So I quit the job as a judge. And in January this year, Swiss Re took 26 awards from Brandon Hall. You see? So this whole thing changed my thinking completely. Quick word about Swiss Re, fantastic company, founded 160 years ago in 1863, 14,500 employees, 3,000 in the US, and we're always looking for great talent. So if you open for a new role, please check our homepage. You will find a career center. We're always looking for great talent. Now, talking about from learning to earning, if you go to the next page, we looked a little bit at how these training development discussions take place. So in previous years, they said, Gabriel, you should learn about transactions. And we turned this around and said, I mean, who cares? You know, the question is more, can Gabriel add value to a transaction? So the future-based discussion should be, if you click again, and we see even some red fields here. So the new thing should be that the manager comes to me and says, Gabriel, can you add something to the sales pipeline? By the way, if you don't know how to do that, we can fund you some training, but that's not the point. The point is, can you add something to the sales pipeline? This is the point. Now, when I go to the training then, I'm very focused, razor focused on creating value, on adding something to the pipeline. I'm highly motivated to do that. And at the end of the program, I will not tell my boss, the trainer was super elegant, it was greatly entertaining, and the coffee was very warm. That's not the discussion we should have. So the boss should ask me, Gabriel, did you add something to the sales pipeline? That's the question. And if I've done that, criteria met. So suddenly we embed training into business issues and we measure the outcome of the business issue. This is from learning to earning. Let's go to the next page. So we always start with solving a real business issue. And if you go on the next page, we can even see that we will, for certain programs, we agree on business goals first. Here in this example, I need to add something to the sales pipeline. That's what I need to do. So I had lots of discussions with our friends from the business to measure the value of adding something to the sales pipeline. So I came there with an estimation and I said, as an L&D person, I thought 20,000 is the value. This is B2B business, big transactions. I thought 20,000. And then we had a big debate and they challenged me on this 20,000. They said, Gabriel, this is not 20,000, it's 50,000. I refused to take the number and I said, if I would quote 50,000, the return on investment of this venture is far too high. I'm not trustworthy. And they said, you have to take the 50,000 because it is 50,000. Now, what a great discussion. I love these discussions. That's where we should be. If we go to the next page. So in that example, we can quote a return on investment of 588%. And by the way, all of that has been done with EI Design, his help of this brochure. 588%, taking my lower numbers, which the business said is far too low, you should have taken the higher number. So if we measure business outcomes and not learning goals, suddenly the numbers are super encouraging. So a quick story, what changed me significantly here was many years ago, we were in a room, several L&D people and a top manager, and we presented all the numbers. He said thousands of people did this and so many, that's the percentage of people who passed the test, so we can prove they understand it. And then here are the happy sheets, the results, and people like it. And then there was this awkward silence. And then the guy said, I think we invest too much into L&D if the ratings are so high. And that meeting, I thought we were patted on the shoulder, changed my thinking completely. And I realized we're not speaking their language, and they are not speaking ours either. So they were speaking about earning, revenue, sales, and we were talking about taxonomy. Philip Kirkpatrick had no clue. And so I thought we completely need to change this. And that resulted in this story. Now, after a few years, after changing that approach, things really became excellent. I had a meeting with one of the top managers in the company, and he said, calculate the new program for sales enablement, come back in 1 week and tell me how much it will be. So I clarified the mandate, calculated it, and came back. Well, it was a 7-digit figure. So I came back, and guess what? He challenged me on the cost. So he said, Gabriel, the cost. I said, yes. He said, the costs are too low. I said, what? Too low? I thought you would say it's too high. He said, calculate properly and come back. So a week later, I came back 10% more and said, I clarified the mandate, I can do that. A week later, 2 weeks later, we went to the board, presented it, and he said, this is calculated very modest. Of course, we have to do it, and you better support it. And I thought, this is the easiest manager meeting I've ever been in. I got the money and I was able to do the project with success. So if you can change from a L&D perspective to a business perspective, it can make all the difference. Let's go to there's a model in 1 or 2 pages, which I tried to create a little bit a holistic perspective. Next page. Here we look at the holistic thing, and I hope you see that as inspiration. It's really food for thought. Now, on the top left side, is the quality high enough? We know that question. We can answer that. That's not something we should focus on. Can we observe progress? Well, some companies measure progress, measurable progress, not in terms of self-assessment, but applied things. Can we see sufficient activity on the left-hand side? Well, we know that. We don't need to talk about this. The critical one is at the bottom right. Do we create enough value with the investment? Can we solve business problems, the ones I just mentioned, and share the value creation in US dollars? Well, we can with this approach. And then we started to produce videos, self-evidenced videos. So we asked people, how much money did you create by applying it? And some people said the training was good. And I said, that's not what you want to hear. How did you apply it and what value did we create? Reduced risk, simplified processes, more revenue, and so on. Now, if the company is not able to create these videos, that's a problem, And so we've got now many of these videos that say we created more revenue, we saved, we streamlined a process, which is better. It made all the difference. The last point, and then I'll hand over to Matt. On the right-hand side, you will see, do we spend enough? Another food for thought. Many would ask, do we spend too much? What do we spend enough? Do we spend enough time per employee to learn? Do the managers spend enough time on promoting their people and making L&D a topic? And do we spend enough money per person? If you want to buy a Ferrari, you need to have a good credit card. You cannot go with a Fiat budget to a Ferrari dealer and think you'll get a Ferrari. No, they'll show you the door. So if you want to become world-class in L&D, you need to spend money. It's wishful thinking to say you can do that for free, So do we spend enough? That's a question. And then do we create enough value with it? So I hope that this holistic model really got you thinking, and we are looking forward to good questions from you towards the end of that program. And with that, I think we prepared a good next interaction, Matt.
Absolutely. It'd be better if you could hear me. So with that, as we talk about, as you think about your organization and are you measuring the impact of learning, or if you sometimes don't do that, what is it that gets in the way? So Melissa, let's go ahead and launch this poll. And when you think about what are the things that are challenging you or getting in the way of your organization being able to effectively and consistently measure the impact of your learning. We asked this question on a survey not that long ago, and 40% of the organizations responding came back to say that they didn't have the right budget or staffing. And another 30% said that they didn't have the technology to support the analysis that they needed to do that to measure it well. And about half of us are still using Excel spreadsheets, which is okay as long as you have the right data and the right know-how in learning and using those tools. And about 2/3 are using their learning management systems, whatever it comes with, as well as looking at some standalone analytics tools like Tableau, Metrics That Matter, and Power BI. All right, Melissa, let's go ahead and throw those results up and let's see where we fall. So looks like about half don't know how to link learning to organizational performance. That's what that item says. And about almost another half, we can't access the business metrics from other parts of the organization. And I imagine that comes up quite a bit. About 40% don't always deliver learning that has a direct alignment to performance outcomes. And then right behind that, we don't have the technology to support this type of analysis. So again, common themes that we're seeing. So Paul, how does that line up with your experience and the conversations that you have at PepsiCo?
Yeah, it's a really interesting insight, because there was 2 points there. We don't know how to link the learning to the metrics. And I think, what was the highest one, Matt, that came out?
The highest one was we don't know how to link the learning outcomes to the performance outcomes.
Yeah, and that comes down to, if there's one word that I'll have you remember, if you only remember one thing out of this, remember partnership, because it's very much about creating that partnership between L&D and the business. You know, as I talked through this, you know, I heard Gabriel say, you know, we're not speaking the same language. I'll talk a little bit about, you know, net promoter scores and happy sheets and how people feel about learning as L&D professionals. And as I get into it more, the business isn't interested in how people feel. The business is interested in the bottom line. The business is interested in the metrics that value them. And the other one was, you know, around investment and investing money into learning. I promise you the money is there. If we need to do it, we have to do it. And we will do it, but we have to trust L&D as partners. Right. So as I talk through, we'll talk through examples of PepsiCo where we've seen that come up before. And Matt, you mentioned Excel as something, as a tool that's being used. Let's always remember in L&D, and it's the leave it model of people, processes, technology. Don't worry about the technology. Start with the people, and in that order, and strictly in that order. Start with the right people. Let's develop the right people. Let's implement good processes, and then let's get the technology to match it. Often it's you know, it's like a nail going around looking for a hammer in organizations, where we get the big shiny new tool, and then we say, right, now we have to train our people on how to use it. We've probably missed a trick there. But yeah, so those are the initial thoughts. So as we talk through the you know, attempts to measure impact on the next slide, let's look at, you know, how closely we're aligning those initiatives, because we talked about the partnership, but many of us exist in those silos already. And L&D, by the way, we have to be self-reflective here on how L&D performs and how we're aligning. How it links to the business steering committee is going to be really important. And then the strategies and how they link. You know, it's Matt, you mentioned sports earlier. I'm a big sports fan, right? And often in organizations, we see ourselves in these silos. It's like, you know, football positions, one position thinking they're more important than the other. It's one club, one team. You know, we're all part of one journey together. And our individual successes mean nothing if it's a group failure. We credit, you know, W. Edwards Denning and Peter Drucker with, you know, you can't manage what you can't measure. Very simplistic, but in L&D, we often measure the wrong things, right? I mentioned earlier, you know, happy sheets, hours of learning, satisfaction scores. If that's your L&D, it's critically flawed. Even beyond that, if it goes further and your measure becomes a goal, right, and it becomes a target, it loses all its impact. So if we say, oh, by next year, we want a score of 4.5 out of 5 for our learning program. So based on what? Based on feeling? You know, that's not linked to the business initiative. So if we do want to become that trusted partner, we have to deliver on business focused measures, right? So when we're solely aligned to our own L&D goals, we will struggle. And it means a seat at the table is critical. It means that L&D need to sit at the table with business leaders and link to the strategy. And similarly, we have to make sure that we unlock the success by linking L&D in as well. When I see in organizations two critical flaws, L&D deciding what the learning strategy will be alone and in a vacuum and saying, this is the learning strategy we're going to implement in business. It doesn't work because the business buy-in isn't there. The resources won't be made available to them. Similarly, I see the opposite of that. The business saying, well, we understand the business better than any L&D person, therefore we know it better, we'll teach our people how to do it. Again, critically flawed because that's not their profession. That's not what they do. What we found examples of, and we have it, I did previously lead research and development learning globally in PepsiCo. I now lead operations learning globally. And in both cases, I demanded that L&D would have a seat at the table. And also that we would then set up a council that would involve key learners. So we have, within our R&D college team, we have 8 schools that are based on the strategic goals of the business, and each has a representative. That council meets regularly and in partnership with an L&D council. And we talk about what are the skills we need for our business? What are the things that we need to build in each of those areas? So when we talk about how the strategy supports it, the first thing to do is understand the business strategy, not the learning strategy, by the way. The business strategy is critical to understand. What are the goals? Set the objectives. Start with the end in mind. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. And then check, are we meeting those strategic goals? So we have a strategic goal. We then have a learning intervention based on the strategy. As we design that, we must check back. Does that meet the strategic needs? And question it. And then set business-focused outcomes. And by the way, for any L&D professionals that are getting very nervous that we'll no longer have happy sheets and MPS scores, we can still have that, but that can't be your sole focus for measurement. It is only a measurement. It's not a target. The target is achieving business results. I was interested to see that, when L&D professionals in the McKinsey survey said that they were very or fully aligned, 57% were very or fully aligned. My first thought was, if we did that survey of business leaders, would that be at 57% as well? An example, we talked to individuals and their line managers ahead of a training, and we asked, did you align on strategic goals for this learning outcome? 67% of line managers said that they did align on the goals for their employee to attend a training. 33% of attendees said that they aligned with their manager. Something was missing in between those two, I can tell you. And again, lacking direction from the top in the Open University survey, and leadership team doesn't value learning. They'll value it if it's delivering on their level. So as we look on to the next slide, and we talk about the attempts to measure impact, we look at how are we solving those business issues, right? And brilliant to have Gabriel on, because a lot of what he talked about was, when we go from learning to earning and when we solve business issues, that's fine if we start with the business issue first, right? So we talked about linking learning to a strategic goal. And once this is the case, right, we have to ensure that we're helping colleagues get the maximum impact from the learning. That impact is business focused, okay? When we say, rather than learn something, it's not that they're not learning something, it's with a purpose in mind. So, you start with the end in mind. We make sure we know our destination. What is the strategic goal? What we've done in PepsiCo is we've looked at putting smart objectives around our training. By the end of this training, I will be able to. And sounds quite simple, but then you check on, is that linked to our strategic priority? And by the way, if it's not, you don't do it. We don't do learning for the sake of learning. Is it linked to our strategic goal, and how will it inform it? And I briefly saw some things flash up about soft skills in the chat. It's not just hard functional skills either. Our soft skills contribute to our strategic goals. We'll talk a little bit later about return on investment, and I have some opinions on that as well. But let's think that as we build every training program, how can it link to our strategic goals? And if we can't find a link between both, let's question why we're doing it in the first place. I hear a lot, and when we talk to our teams, they say, what we do is very hard to measure. Why? Surely it's quite simple to measure. We have a problem or a need, and by the end of this, we should be able to do something different. We'll change a behavior, or we'll perform something a little bit differently than we did. So setting those SMART objectives, making it specific, measurable, attainable, real-time and time-bound, right? And realistic and time-bound are critical in order for us to know we've achieved it. The analogy I always give is, I don't get in the car and just start driving without knowing my destination. And I know the success of my car journey by achieving the destination I had set out and getting there in time, right? Or how did I overcome the challenges along the way? So let's set with the end in mind as well. If we look at the next slide. Sorry, is there a question in the chat? Vishnu, I hear you off mute.
There are several things happening in the chat and some questions coming up, but you will get to those in a few minutes, Paul. Okay. So let's keep going for now.
All right. Well, look, as we go through it, right, one of the things to look at is, how can we identify the right talent? Okay, so the half-life, according to IBM, the half-life of perishable skills is set at about 2.5 years. Right. We are now losing skills, perishable skills at that, faster than we're losing our cell phones. Right, that's the time it has. The idea of a job for life isn't there anymore, right? So we have to look at the people that we have and understand that the people that we hired may no longer be qualified to do the job we hired them for. I challenge you to think back, and we look at, semi-perishable skills are set somewhere between 2.5 and 7.5 years. You look at the average tenure of your workforce, they may be doing things very, very differently. I think we might talk a little bit about generative AI later on, but think back 5 years and you said, oh, in future, you're going to have a co-pilot who do your presentations for you, not a human, but a bot that's going to do it. Your career discussions in 3 years' time will most likely be with an AI who knows you better than your manager ever did, and may even know things about you don't want them to know, will know your team better, and will know the opportunities in your organization better. So understanding the people is really important as we do it. But our role is to ensure that, our interventions impact on those behaviors and performance of individuals. There was mentioned in the chat earlier about, the value of learning and how do we show our value. Learning's often a hygiene factor. I have examples, and plenty of them, of if you want to see the value of learning, stop. And you'll soon see the importance of learning in your organization, and at that, the right learning. So we sometimes look at this as a hygiene factor in business, that it's always there, it's a crutch. And also, it's not just L&D driven learning. L&D should be there as a partner to support and structure the learning that happens. Not necessarily deliver it. The partnership comes from the business knowledge that's there as well. So what we can do is we can build structure. And as an example I had of another organization, we're developing an onboarding program. And I was really interested in looking at what they were doing. And they said, well, we do the business awareness, and we do the day-to-day, and we get them ready, and then they go to their functions. I said, well, who's supporting their functional and sub-functional learning? I said, oh, we leave that to the business. You're an L&D team. Right, so L&D has to be a touch point in every part where learning happens, and help structure that. And then measuring those capability gaps, right? What are the skills and competencies that we have? Gabriel mentioned it earlier. Stop focusing on just writing a skills taxonomy. That's just the start of it. Then go and build your skills into the capabilities you need. How do they link to the roles, and how do they link to the jobs we have, to make sure we have that interchange, right? So that we ensure that we have that consistency all the way through with L&D. All right, I'll finish off just talking a little bit about return on X. All right. So on the next slide, I think we talk about, you know, how well are investments used, and the levels of lower levels of Phillips or Kirkpatrick. And again, L&D people love to get into the Kirkpatrick model, and I can absolutely see why. We love structure and we love approach, but I would say we need to pivot from just solely looking at return on investment, because if we have it as a number, there's a number of programs that will suit that model, right? Sales, negotiation training, where I can show a bottom line. Soft skills training isn't going to show you a massive return on investment. You know, if I teach someone to be a better human being, how can I quantify that in a number? So I might look at another return, and the return I look at is return on expectation, right? By developing my people, by developing them as individuals and their soft skills, am I retaining them? Are my people seeing higher levels? If I build a leadership training program, how am I analyzing the pool of talent that exit that program into the future? Do they stay longer? Do they get promoted faster? Examples we have is programs that we've run in leadership. We've seen those who invest the time and attend those programs have a higher promotion rate than those who regularly get promoted just without doing those programs. So we know that it's not causation. There's a correlation there between it. When we talk about Kirkpatrick as well, what I find really interesting in L&D organizations is
in a webinar.
when I see that a lot of what we do, and someone's off mute there, so I don't know if you guys want to mute that. A lot of what we do in organizations is focus on level one, on the reaction and how people feel. There needs to be a focus starting with Kirkpatrick at level 4. I spoke to the Kirkpatrick Institute about this many years ago, and I spoke to one of the children who said, if my father had one wish, he'd wish that people would start at level 4. And he showed me a picture of his dad holding up 4 fingers. You start your journey at level 4. You set that at what's the outcome focus of this. You can measure at level 1, absolutely fine. But in that partnership, start your journey with the business at level 4. What are the outcomes of the learning we want? And then by all means, measure from 1 through 2, through 3, through 4. But ultimately report to the business how we've partnered with you to deliver your strategy and how learning is impacted on that. I see a comment there. Begin with the learner first. I would integrate the learner into the program. I don't know if it's the learner first. I would say that the strategy is there. When you build a program, always work with the learner in mind and have a sample of it, but I'm not so sure about the learner first. Oh yeah,
we would actually going back to Gabriel's model that he shared, and you said it at the top of your section as well, Brandon Hall Group. We also advocate you don't start with the learner, you start with the outcome. And by outcome, we are talking about the business results. What is the number? What is the target that you are actually trying to move? And you build back to the learner from there. But you don't necessarily start with the learner. You have to start with what are we trying to accomplish? So we've got a ton of questions we want to get to. So I'm very quickly going to throw this next polling question up. This is a chat poll. So we're going to ask you to respond directly into chat. What is something that you've done in the past year or two? We want to learn from you right now to improve the business impact of your L&D work. And I can tell from the conversations happening in the chat that this is active work for you. This is several of you are actively engaged in trying to solve these problems and answer these questions. So we're interested to learn from some of you that have done it successfully. And as that is coming out, as those are coming out, I'm actually going to jump us right to Rahul's section of the presentation and get us started, because I do want to save us some time for getting to questions and answers. And so we're seeing lots of things come up, Rahul, about linking closely to business decision makers, allowing the stakeholders to define success for the program, operationalizing LMS with an efficiency metric, providing leadership development for all. So there's lots of different stuff that's coming through, lots of great ideas. But what do you see and what do you recommend as L&D teams are making this transition?
Sure, Matt. Thank you again for the valuable insights. Also, I'm sure that the quote that you shared at the top of the webinar, which said, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu," I think that got the juices flowing in the chat. It's been quite lively since then. And Gabriel, I completely agree with you that learning must solve business problems, not learning problems. And we should all agree what business success looks like upfront. It also ensures that the ROI calculation is not murky, but rather very objective. Paul, thank you again for your valuable insights on what the symptoms, you call them KPIs, could look like for a business leading learning and development organization versus ones that's totally de-linked from business. So my section is about the how, though I'd like to spend a couple of minutes to summarize how the why has shaped my personal thinking on the how behind the learning to earning journey. So a quick flashback. My first job was in media. I was responsible for helping grow a B2B media product that was focused on healthcare. My first manager was a highly accomplished marketing leader. Some called her a guru. I was in my early 20s, and she often asked me, "So what?" And this harmless inquiry was consistent, from big meetings to small tasks, almost permanent in a proposal for a new initiative that would be an additional cost to the company. And while the way the question was asked was not the most pleasant, the clarity, or sometimes the reveal of the lack of clarity, was highly impactful. The lack of clarity often was unstructured rambling or a lengthy document that led to nowhere. I'm paraphrasing here to make it audience appropriate. My manager would say, "I'm not interested in an academic commentary on why we should pursue this initiative. I'm not interested in a bookish framework that justifies this initiative. I'm interested in understanding how this benefits our customers and our company. Will our customers be happier? How happy will they be? Will they stay with us longer? For how long? Will they buy more? How much? Why should I believe a 20-year-old fresh out of business school?" That experience has stuck with me. And looking back, that was her method to cut through the noise, a way to understand the intended business outcome, not the input. Sure, the delivery could have been a tad less abrasive, but I'm sure we've all had that experience when a manager has transformed our mindset despite having challenged interpersonal skills. Over the years, I have adapted the same approach to my situation. I usually lean on the 5 why framework in business. Sometimes I even double down and ask the 5 why questions twice. And the essence there is you get to the root cause very quickly, and that allows you to frame the problem so that you can understand whether the solution is smart, as Paul pointed out. And I hope my delivery has been empathetic over the years. As we've learned through the course of this webinar, learning to earning is not an optional strategy to improve L&D. It is the only way we can be successful. It's the only way all of us on this webinar can be successful at our jobs. Now that we've created enough attention around the severity of why learning to earning is the only way, we must offer a solution through a subtle plug. So Matt, if you could move to the next slide. At EI, we use a learning and performance ecosystem to build effective learning and development programs that power excellent business results, some of which Gabriel covered. We do this by adapting a comprehensive learner-centric approach. What does that mean? Short answer, personalized learning at scale. Optimize learner for the context of each learner and the environment. But what's the context? The context is the learner's business situation and the opportunities arising from that particular business situation. So the model offers 2 advantages. It facilitates efficient retraining and upskilling through engaging formal and informal learning processes. Beyond classes and courses, using performance support tools for learning continuum fosters competency and skill development. And we heard some of that in the chat, while supporting the most stringent goal of behavioral change through learning, which then creates long-term value for the business. Finally, the model is intended to improve training effectiveness and efficiency by laying the foundation for emphasizing both L&D and business KPIs. It assists in determining the best evaluation model for measuring business impact and promotes continuous improvement through an iterative structure. Our relentless focus has always been on creating value for both learners and business. For learners through return on effectiveness, for business through return on investment. So moving on to the next slide, man, that's okay. So slides, this is called the litmus framework. I like to personally call this slide cutting through the noise. There may be better substitutes for the word noise depending on your context, but it helps you cut through it. Obtaining the desired ROI through training might be difficult if a proper method is not used. At EI, we use a proprietary consulting framework called Litmus, which starts with a detailed needs analysis. But this needs analysis is focused on business problems. It then proposes learning strategies to satisfy the solutions to those problems, which again are business problems, but the solution could be learning opportunities. And finally closes the loop by measuring the impact and the ROI after implementation. The framework, like the litmus paper test we used in the chemistry labs in middle school, has been able to present proven results to ensure customers achieve the business effect they require. EI has been in this business for 3 decades. We've supported several L&D leaders and teams to elevate their position in establishing a strong connection to business, impact, revenue, and profit. Our growing team of learning practitioners live and breathe learning to earning. It is our relentless focus on the learning to earning journey which sets us apart. Come talk to us. We love to share some war stories and transformational experiences that have shaped us.
Excellent, Rahul. Thank you for that, adding that perspective. I'd like to move us into our Q&A time with just about 9 minutes left in our time together. And I know there have been questions coming in throughout our time together, and the panelists have been engaged in responding to some of those in writing, and it is also continuing to happen in the chat. So thank you all for your active participation. We definitely appreciate that. One question that I do want to ask of the panel, because I've seen it come up in a variety of themes and variations throughout our time together today, is this concept of isolating the impact of learning to performance and being able to, we used to call it back in the day, the one-to-one comparison, to say this learning absolutely created this outcome. And I find that a lot of learning professionals get stuck here. So Paul, Gabriel, Rahul, what's your response to that learning professional that says, I can't prove that my training created that outcome?
Well, that's a great one, because that's at the essence of what we talk about. So I would say it's not possible, which is why we exactly do the other approach, which you look at the business question, because we can't answer that. I've been struggling with this question, but it's the same question that we raised at the beginning that said, what's the value of learning? What's the value of people that love a certain training? What's the value of people passing a test? You know, we don't know. And so the thinking was rather to say, let's start with the business problem, help people with learning, and then have a party when the business problem was solved. So that's but I'm interested in other people's perspective too.
I think it's like the meaning of life question, right? You're looking here to draw a correlation. You know, I had a Q&A interaction there with someone just now, you know, saying that retention isn't based just on learning. No, it's based on learning and development for a start, right? But you're looking at that correlation between, we had a challenge, we developed a strategy that included a learning intervention, we set the goals, we had an outcome, we measured those against the goals, therefore we can claim success based on that. But if you don't set those goals and strategy at the start, then you have a challenge. But and by the way, you'll always have somebody who contradict it and say, well, the reason why it worked wasn't because of your training. It was because engineering put in a fix that actually did it. Everyone will claim credit when it gets done properly. So you can only say, well, I can draw a correlation between when we didn't have a learning intervention and when we did.
Yeah,
That's exactly
I just
right.
like
And
to, sorry, man. I
Go
just
ahead,
like to go
Rahul.
back to Paul's comment earlier in the webinar about partnership. I think if you're going to think of it as two adversaries trying to figure out who gets the credit, you've kind of lost the, you know, the journey. The journey doesn't make sense. So I think the first part is, of course, setting the business objective. Not always looking for causation. A correlation should be sufficient. And as long as business and learning partner rather than take an adversarial view at each other, you can actually measure, at least to a certain level of confidence, you know, how much the needle has moved.
Yes, absolutely. That correlation versus causation conversation is so important, and apparently so is the letter C this afternoon. The next question that came up, I do also want to put to the panel: how do you support the business with learning when their requests are not data-driven, but emotionally driven, and requests are based on opinions of a select few? This is where we live our lives, gentlemen. So how do we navigate those very common waters?
Well, there are probably moments when it's good to do it, but that doesn't mean that we do a big thing out of it, you know? So sometimes some people shout loud, and then it's good to do something. But the big project, the vast majority, needs to be very closely linked to business value creation, you know? As you say, in Switzerland, there's always an exception to the rule, but the vast majority should exactly be business focused, you know? But I wouldn't say it should be zero, you know? As you said, there's a reality of life too.
And I think, look, we have a shared vision, mission, and purpose within an organization. My challenge to the business in the past has been, well, how can we link this back to our strategy? You point to me in the strategy, and if we're going to be transactional about it, let's point to the strategy where this can impact on it, and let's work together. Again, back to that partnership. But yeah, look, there are circumstances, I'm sure, driven by opinion or thought, but you have to be logical about it. You know, at the end of the day, as a bottom line here, it is a business we're running, and it's, you know, it's not just about people's thoughts and feelings all the time.
Yeah, and I'd even look for a trade. Say, okay, we'll do this one, but the next one has to be super data driven, and let's talk about the next project as well while we're talking about this one. So, you know, because sometimes you just have to you just have to check that box, but then you sow the seeds for the next one.
I think that this is also where setting the expectations of the organization about the purpose of learning in the organization, and that comes from the very top, and that takes time. A consistent message of, we are here to move the business forward. And so gives you, as the learning professional, the learning leader, the opportunity to say, my team is here to move the business forward. Help me understand how this does that, and put that burden of proof back on the customer. And then sometimes, like Rahul says, sometimes you just have to do it, and you do it, and I think the trade-off is a great approach as well. I think we've got time for one last question on soft skills. We're trying to compare overall sales results. Seeing as wholesalers I support have to build and keep relationships with advisors, we are comparing sales results to course completion. For example, are the wholesalers who go through soft skills training ending up with higher sales? Do we think this is valuable or too disconnected? So this is a pretty specific question, but the approach definitely applies. Thought from the team?
Yeah, so I think if I caught the question, so I was reading a comment here as well. If I caught the question, it was about the impact of the sales training on the completions, on the performance, right? Well, first of all, if you're going to try and draw a parallel to it, make sure that the sales training delivered versus the strategy. So is that sales training something that impacts on the strategy? Measuring completions, I spoke about it earlier. It's a necessary evil. It's not a target. We shouldn't be talking about number of hours people spent in training or number of people who've done a program. If every sales associate has done the program and the performance and the business results are there, we've won. You know, and Rahul made this point earlier. We've won as a team. One club, one culture. It's about all of us. So I would say that I wouldn't be so much worried about the completions. I would I would start with the business result first, right? So before we ever measure anything, first thing we measure is the business outcome. Second thing we measure is the learner input and learner interaction.
I think that's spot on, Paul, and thanks for that. There will be several resources that are available to you guys through the handout, and I apologize, I'm not clear if these will be included in the email or not, but you'll have access to a couple of reports and ebooks that you can see on the slide here. Gabriel, Rahul, and Paul, thank you so much for your time today and your valuable insights and experience in this important conversation. Reminder to all of our participants that you will be receiving a link to the recording of today's session, as well as a handout version of the presentation. Please reach out to EI Design. eidesign.net is their website. Any of the speakers, I'm sure, would be glad to hear from you through LinkedIn or other channels. Thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be in the world.